Welcome to episode 16, Fables, Folk, and Fairy Tales.
Did you have a favorite fairy tale growing up? One that you enjoyed watching? One that titillated you? One that weirded you out?
If you did, had you ever thought about why?
Listen in as we discuss what's behind the veneer of the fairy tale. What's driving the characters? What's really causing them to transform? Who really are the victims?
And who really are the villains?
Mm.
Stay tuned. Welcome to the Witchy Wit podcast, where we look at life through a witchy lens. I'm KImberlyn.
I'm Leilani.
At Witchy Wit, we explore current events,
Ideas,
music and books,
and experiences in ways that recognize energy and life in everybody and everything.
We are both real witches,
And we bring two real perspectives through the lens of our different ages
races,
and backgrounds.
with a healthy skepticism for what we have been told is true. Our conversations are raw, candid, and vulnerable.
Join us as we cast a spell to uncover what we each know is true in our intuitive, witchy selves.
Before we get into today's topic, which is fables, folk, and fairy tales, let's just see what we're doing, what's going on in our lives right now. What's going on with you, Leilani?
So I wanted to check in. My partner bought a VR headset, which is something that I would never purchase myself. And he plays a lot of first-person shooter games and stuff like that, but he wanted me to experience it. And so I told him if I was going to experience it, he needed to find something that I would like, which is not
a first-person
shooter game. So he found a meditation and mindfulness app, and I have been using it every night. It's been about a week, and I really, really like it. So I like it for a lot of reasons. It's like really immersive, and because of that, it's really engaging, and so I really like that. But one of the things I really like about it is this idea that I'm a witch and that I like trees, you know.
Yeah.
But what I really like about it is like this idea of embracing technology in ways that maybe aren't something that I would have considered before.
Right.
So I really, really like it. And just so that everyone listening knows, I brought it with me. And before we started recording, I had KImberlyn try it on. And so what did you think about the mindfulness app?
Oh my gosh, it's so incredible. So you know what it is for me? I think so it was incredibly immersive. I had to breathe with it and breathe in, and there were little graphic things where the breath was leaving my mouth and then coming back in, and then we tried a couple of other parts of this program, and the thing that I really liked about it was the fact that this kind of floating in this beautiful there was graphics, but this beautiful atmosphere to me is really what our spirits are doing, you know. And if I allow myself to relax a little bit more, I might be able to experience some of that sitting on my sofa in my room that I need to vacuum the carpet in, you know. So I love that immersive quality, and I think I might be buying one.
And this was your first time in VR, right?
This is my first. This is I'm assuming you mean something other than like going to IMAX or something.
Yeah.
Yes, totally. It's just amazing. I loved it. Thank you so much for that experience.
You're welcome. I really like it too. One of the calming ones that I did, I tried to do this before bed. I was in the earth with roots all around me, and then there were like crystals. I know, and I thought, I was like, a witch designed this. Clearly a witch designed this, because this is where I always want to be.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, so first of all, I'm going to get the VR headset or system or whatever. And second of all, I'm getting that program because that was amazing. And I'm sure there's other ones to play with too, but I love the idea that I can kind of do meditation and just relax and calm. I can do it without it, right? But why not use technology to help me do the things that, that's what technology is supposed to do, right? To help you to live your life better. And theoretically. why not? And oh my gosh, it was so much, and it was so much fun.
Yeah.
And I maybe eventually you get used to it. I mean, you haven't had it long enough to really be able to say, but in the meantime,
I know, I still think it's really cool.
Oh, it's amazing. I was trying to make my eyes go in various places, and my head, I'm sure I looked like a moron. With my head just kind of going sliding.
I may or may not have taken a few videos to show you.
I, of course, made a joke because I don't know how long was I doing it? Maybe
15 minutes.
15 minutes, really? Wow. I, of course, made a joke about her, like, cleaning up my house while I was sitting there. And she's, like, tipping out with my television. Of course, you don't need a television now because you have the...
Right, that's true, that's true.
So,
I take your essential oils.
Yeah, there you go.
That's where I go.
But that's amazing. Thank you so much. That was brilliant.
You're very, very welcome. What about you? What's going on with you outside of Witchydom?
Well, outside of Witchydom, someone came to my house about a half hour ago with, I don't know, how many bags? Like 8, 10? 10 bags of mulch. Like, the way to a woman's heart is to bring mulch to her house, knowing that I have all these great ideas for my yard, but they stay ideas. And just having, just the mulch in my garage now is a step towards actually making it look like something that, someone might actually want to walk through. So in case that's not clear, Leilani brought over 10 bags of mulch because she's going to help me create something out of that jungle that's my front yard. Thank you so much. I am so looking forward to it. It's so exciting that, just taking that step, right? Because it just means that, eventually at some point in my life, before I die, hopefully, there will be like a little garden path and
Since I've known you, you've had that pile of rocks taking up half of 50% of your driveway, like where one car would park is covered in rocks.
Well, actually, I do that on purpose, so
that no one can chime in.
No, that's not true.
Okay, anyways.
It's just sheer laziness on my part.
And you've always said, like, oh, it's for landscaping. And so my sister, who loves to landscape because she's an earth witch, finally asked me, and I was like,
are we going to get this bitch set up?
We can do it. We can do it. So we bought you mulch. What does it mean about our friendship if we're at the level where I can buy you mulch?
and it's like, oh my gosh. And I'm so upset. When she brought it, I literally just kind of stared at the back of her car for, I don't know.
You did. I wasn't sure if you were offended or excited or just confused.
Yeah, I probably kind of, not offended, but probably just confused. And I mean, I was literally speechless. I didn't have words,
which is rare. So, I don't know that I've known you to have that happen many times.
Yeah, no, it doesn't happen that often. But you did it. Thank you so
Yay!
much. And just the thought of just the thought that you thought about me. Just that's, I think that more than the mulch itself, it's like a gift, right? They say it's the thought that counts. Yeah, I'm sure that's the case. But in this case, it really, really was the fact that somewhere at one point during the day you said, you know what? Let's get KImberlyn some mulch. Like, thank you so much. I'm so looking forward to doing something with it. I'm not sure what, but something, mulching something.
We'll post pictures maybe whenever so that people can see.
That would be delightful. Thank you so much. Yay. So as we start talking about fables, folk, and fairy tales, the first thing I wrote down in our little outline was, what's the difference, and does the difference matter? And okay, I'd like to speak to it a little bit if you want to just chime in. So the basic idea, so theoretically, fables are tales that have a moral, like Aesop or something like that. And folk and fairy tales are kind of interchangeable, but folk tales generally are about and one thing about fables is generally they're allegorical. They're often animals that have human characteristics, etc. And folk tales are basically tales about human beings, and there could be a little bit of the supernatural involved with it, but it's basically about humans living human lives. Whereas fairy tales are touching, either they're tales about supernatural beings, or they're about the interaction between human and the supernatural, the non-human. And does it matter? I don't know. I mean, we tend to call them all fairy tales, even though they're not all fairy tales. But I don't think. I guess if you're a study a student of this, it makes a
Mm-hmm.
difference. So let me just tell you this really fast. I just finished a book by Philip Pullman. He wrote his Dark Materials, The
Mm-hmm.
Golden Compass,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all essays on writing. And he actually has a chapter where he talks about the Brothers Grimm and how they found this material
Oh wow.
and all of that kind of stuff. And if we have time, maybe I'll share some of it, but I don't know. Which was really fascinating, and about writing and how valuable fairy tales and fables are for children growing up, but also for our lives in general, which I thought was so timely that we decided we were going to do this.
That's cool.
When I just finished that book about a week ago. So
Nice.
yeah.
And I want to add in something that's different, but for our purposes is kind of the same with it, which is
myth and legends.
Yeah, myth and legends, and the way that those interact with our lives. And I think specifically as a witch, they interact with my spirituality. And I feel like I learn from and process my life through these different archetypes and experiences, and as a child and as an adult. And even revisiting those, like we'll talk later, revisiting those stories as an adult, seeing the same thing but seeing it from a different way.
Totally.
And then even learning more from those.
Yeah.
And sometimes I may not be super fun because I just bring my English teacherness into it, and sometimes that makes people get annoyed with me. And then
because you start deconstructing.
I do, things. And I'm like whenever Harry Potter was coming out and we were reading it, I remember because I fell in love with Dumbledore, and I remember I was in college, so I was knee deep in my English teacher, which means like my English teacher learnings, which means I thought that I knew everything because I was like in
college. Yeah,
I was in college age.
Sophomore.
So I was a wise fool. I knew everything. I thought, but I'm reading it and I'm like falling in love with Dumbledore, and I was like, oh, he's gonna die. He's gonna die, and people are like, what are you talking about? Don't and I'm like, well, it's clear from the like the archetypal structure of his character, like that's the type of he's gonna have. But don't worry, he'll come back. And my friends at the time were just like, you're no fun. We don't like to be with you. You ruin everything.
You're ruining Harry Potter.
Then he died and he came back and he sat in the train station, and I was vindicated. But
because a wise woman knows what a wise woman knows, right? So you actually were wise.
And
maybe not. Maybe you were not wise in as much as you were sharing that wisdom with other people who didn't really want to hear it.
That is where I like the difference between like wisdom and something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Knowledge and wisdom. I had the knowledge. Maybe I didn't have the wisdom.
There you go. That's it. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But what I love about our discussion about this is that we can kind of go like you will not destroy it for me, and hopefully I won't destroy it for you, so we can kind of take a deep dive and totally deconstruct it and then come back up and still talk about what we love about it, right? So maybe some historical background. Would you care to get us started?
Yeah, so one of the things I think is really interesting is looking at fairy tales from the perspective of them being a reflection of what people are thinking about and processing at that time, and then knowing that it's being processed and written down through that lens. So even when we go back farther from like the Brothers Grimm time, or even before that, I like to remember that I'm looking at a piece of writing that's being filtered through whatever sort of patriarchal or gender structures of the time. And that's true for now, like with the Disney and the Pixar fairy tales. So I think that's like one thing that's interesting to remember. And then also, I read this really cool book called Spinning Straw into Gold, and the author is Joan Gould. And I read this book a while ago, but it's like a feminist perspective on fairy tales, and then it's kind of like a psychological analysis of fairy tales and what that means about maiden, mother, and crone, and the transformation of a woman through that. And while I find the book somewhat reductive sometimes, I find it mostly awesome, but sometimes I'm just like, if you talk about women's only purpose being having babies one more time, like I'm just going to throw this book across the room. but I get what she's saying, and it's really great. But one of her main things is that older fairy tales, Brothers Grimm and before, are really about transformation. And after that, like the Disney stuff is about romance. They substitute for the female protagonist. They substitute her personal transformation for relational,
like a physical. Yeah. a change in her circumstances.
Yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so for like more of like an obvious example of that, like with a more well-known fairy tale, like the Cinderella fairy tale
mm-hmm.
from Brothers Grimm, or before, because there are many incarnations of that story before it landed as Cinderella. Like that was more about her personal transformation as a person, but then the Disney one is like she's just like hanging out waiting for her prince to come, and then people screw her over, and then someone helps her out, and then her prince finds her.
Yeah.
And it's all about romance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And romance being so here's the thing. I don't mean to imply at all that the Grimm brothers were at all feminists.
Something tells me I doubt that they were, but we can hope.
Yeah. But even in the tales that they transcribed that they didn't write, because some people are still unclear about that, mm-hmm. but that they gathered from various sources and that they published, a lot of this is the goal is that she eventually finds her prince and she gets married, but so much of the tale is the stuff that happens before that. Right.
Yeah.
And we don't get that. We get all of the stuff that happens around her. She's more of in some of the Disney films, not in all of them, but in some of the Disney films, she's an object as opposed to a subject. Right. And so she's and in some cases she's actually an archetype more than anything else. Yes. Right. The I mean, we call them the Disney princesses, right? Mm-hmm. So there's that element, though. As my students in my intro to film music class, every year there's someone who does a presentation on how they've changed. Mm-hmm. So that even Disney gets woke, right? But it's about, so for example, they have, I think you mentioned the fact that they have tasks mm-hmm. that they have to perform, and to us they may seem kind of mundane, like you have to, I think in one of them they have to pull all the peas
out of the ashes, something,
or they have to separate the peas from rice or something like that, right? Or mm-hmm. stones. And they're mundane tasks, but it's really the hero's journey.
Yes.
It's
mm-hmm.
the heroine's journey, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so the tasks are small because maybe as we said, the Grimm brothers are not feminists, so they may not have given them the type of tasks that might be given to a hero. But nonetheless, before she can get into that, before they even think about the pumpkin becoming a carriage, mm-hmm. she has to do certain things, right? And so she earns it. Mm-hmm. And so, but the thing about it in Disney, and I think I put this down in our notes, the thing about in Disney, she's so passive mm-hmm. that it's the fairy godmother comes in, does all of this and sings her great song, and mm-hmm. and she's a beautiful princess, and we don't get the fact that girl worked for that dress, girl worked for that carriage.
I think too, some of the passivity, like sleeping mm-hmm. in the Disney films, it's she falls asleep and now she's just waiting for her prince to mm-hmm. come and hack mm-hmm. through these vines mm-hmm. to get to her, or mm-hmm. climb a tower to get to her, mm-hmm. whatever. But the sleeping or the going away, or we'll talk about Into the Woods mm-hmm. later, mm-hmm. but the going into the woods or the leaving of the castle or wherever it is, her home, it's all about the time that we need to sleep, the mm-hmm. time we need to turn inward, mm-hmm. the time that we need to transform, mm-hmm. because I am not ready for life until I've worked myself through whatever it is that I'm processing, so that I can then engage.
Yeah, so it's not sleeping, you're cocooning. And inside the cocoon, you're like growing little wings. I'm like
and turning into jelly. Isn't that what happens to butterflies?
It's really scary.
It's really,
but they come out beautiful butterflies, so
Thank you.
It works.
It does sometimes feel really scary though, being
mm-hmm. in that cocoon, because it feels like it's a prison. Mm-hmm. It can be. I mean, it's some. I'm assuming that for the chrysalis, it feels like a little woomy thing. I mm-hmm. Can't get in their head, but it's so much like life, right? How mm-hmm. your perspective of it mm-hmm. can be, okay, I'm in here, I'm growing, I'm I can't move right now, but that's fine because I don't want to move. Mm-hmm. I need to sprout these wings and grow the little hair on my legs, because they do want hair on them.
So do I.
There you go.
See, I'm part chrysalis already.
There you go. Exactly.
I'm transforming.
You're growing. So yeah, it's just a different way of seeing the same behavior, mm-hmm. but what they say when they come out of the behavior kind of gives you more of an indication of what's going on. So
I felt I felt kind of lied to whenever I discovered that the fairy tales I had been shown as a child were like the sanitized, and sometimes I even think more than sanitized. Like there was like this like patriarchal agenda, put in, and I remember feeling like, what? They cut off their heels?
Yeah.
Like that, the birds peck out their eyes, and I remember thinking like, this is way cooler than that other thing.
Well, that's kind of what they deserve. So here's the thing. But what I loved about that, since you brought that up, is the visceral quality. In some, if you read, one of the Grimm versions, literally the Grimm versions, they're so aptly named. Is that they talk about how they cut. So the idea is that the stepsisters. The ugly stepsisters, but the stepsisters in the original, the stepsisters, I don't think they call them ugly, but anyway, the stepsisters, they're trying to fit the slipper, and so they cut off their heels so that they can slide their foot in. But in the one of the original tales, they talk about how the warm slippery blood helps their foot to slide further into the shoe than it would have had they not cut their heel off. So it's pain and torment, but there's also this quality of really making it seem like, well, if you really want to fit this shoe, you cut your heel off.
Right. And how many times in life have I cut my heel off to fit a shoe? I mean, never literally.
Yeah, but that's
a lot of times metaphorically.
Yeah. So I love the way they make it so graphic and so sense oriented that I could kind of embody them or not embody, but I could kind of identify with them for a moment. Like they were mean and the whole bit, but they wanted it bad, and then the birds pecking out their eyes. Like, dang, there's punishment. And if you're mean to your sister, you get punished. There's not, it's not like today where, okay, maybe, but yeah.
And in the same vein of learning through these more rounded fairy tales, like less of the Disney sanitized ones, but the Brothers Grimm and prior, I know that we've done entire retreats or weeks and weeks and months of study on a story, a myth, or a fairy tale, and then walked through it in ritual space. And I've actually been in a ritual where we were sorting beans, just like they did in that
right.
And priestesses came around, and we were sorting. And it's like, I don't know what time it is, 9 p.m. at night in the middle of the woods, so there's no light, and we're like all leaning around, like trying to sort the beans. And then there's these priestesses coming around, and I know it's their job to like mess it up, and they kept messing up our bean sorting.
Like they would like pour.
They would pour more on, or they would knock it out. And the idea is that just like in the myth, like the beans kept getting messed with, because the stepmother didn't want. For the person to be able to sort the beans, and I knew, because of course we had all read the myth and we were all working with it, but every time she kept messing up my beans, I was just like, ah.
So the desperation. So you could kind of identify with the desperation and the frustration. Wow. Yeah, and you get a sense of them less as archetypes or morals, and more as living, breathing human beings, right? You can kind of. And so it makes the actions make more sense than they would to a modern person just hearing the fairy tale.
Yeah.
I mean, a modern adult.
Yes.
A modern adult hearing the fairy tale. One of the things you mentioned is the Disneyfication of fairy tales, and maybe you'd like to speak a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I kind of trash talked Disney a little bit, or a lot of it, but also I have seen and appreciate Disney and Pixar and other companies and their way of telling these tales, but being more mindful of equity and mindful of gender dynamics. And I've been really happy to see that. And so I just jotted down a couple, like Frozen.
So I just to be clear, you're saying in recently, not as a Disney as a whole.
Yes.
You mean recently? Okay.
More recently. And as an adult, I find that recently sometimes means longer and longer.
It's like 20, 30
I know.
years
Whenever
ago.
I looked up when some of these movies came out, I was like, Mulan didn't come out too long ago. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But like,
welcome to my world.
Right. But like Frozen, for example, I remember whenever I saw Frozen in the theater, I did not know the ending. And I was 100% on board with the prince coming and saving everything.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
And then when that doesn't happen, when sisterly love is what saves it, I was floored. And I didn't, it was one of those things I didn't realize how programmed and conditioned I was that this was just what I was going to be fed, you know. And then whenever I wasn't fed that, and in fact I was fed something better, I was blown away.
I felt the same way at the end of Maleficent.
Oof.
Oh my gosh. I mean, and it was blatant in that one because doesn't he come rushing in and they kind of ignore him or something? I'm trying to remember, and it's just the two. I'm gonna choke up. It's just the two women walking. Oh. And just the thought, so the definition of a feminist film or a feminist book or whatever, right? How it's a feminist story?
No, tell me.
It has to have two women who are talking, and they're not talking about a man. Oh, you've heard this?
It's like some
It's two women protagonist, or not protagonists, but two women leads, or something like that, and they're not talking. I mean, they're not talking about romance. They're not talking about a man. They're just talking about other things. And there's another qualification, but I can't remember what it was. But anyway, but that idea of not only did he not save them, but they didn't necessarily need him. So I mean, that's the part that I just thought was so powerful. And the fact that she got her wings back, but
also that.
Yeah. I was like, girl needs her wings. Yeah.
And that's a whole other subset of these fairy tales that I really enjoy, is like looking into the air quotes evil character, and where they were so one dimensional, where they were a flat character before, were given these characteristics so they become a round character. And like, why was Maleficent so gosh darn mad?
Yeah.
And then it's like, whenever we find out, I was like, oh, I would have been just as mad, if not more.
Exactly. Or so the I think the very first book that, and it's since become a musical and the whole bit, but the first book that kind of started looking at things from a different perspective was Wicked, Gregory Maguire's book, where it was, I mean, obviously the musical is made it much more famous, but the book, the first time I read the book, my head literally exploded. I mean, this was 20 years ago, and just the thought of seeing this from such a different viewpoint was just so amazing to me. And because she's a really strong female character, and painted as a witch or bitch or whichever itch you want to call it, right? Neither of which are positive in their context, right?
But positive in my context.
Of course, yeah. What's the word bitch? You say, what is it? Oh, you say that like it's a bad thing.
Right.
But anyway, but the idea that if you are a strong woman, you're almost by definition evil in some of these versions. I mean, like my favorite person in The Little Mermaid, we may differ on this, was the sea hag. I loved Ursula. Yes! First of all, she had the best, so I'm sorry, hands down, she had the best song. She had the best
body language. Like, I remember seeing that as a kid and being like, what is that? Yes.
Yeah, so she's just so amazing. I mean, she didn't come to a good end, right? But that idea that if you have a strong female character, you have to somehow they have to be disciplined. They have to be controlled or corralled. They cannot be strong at the end of the film.
Yeah, and those messages that we're getting through these Disneyfied, we are clearly getting those messages through these Disneyfied fairy tales. But whenever I found out that it hadn't always been that way, I felt so tricked and lied to. And then whenever we move into this like newer branch, like the Wicked, or Frozen, or I was born in Hawaii, but I particularly enjoyed Moana, especially the Te Fiti, the goddess character, and then finding out that Te Fiti's actually the same as Te Kā, the volcano character, and finding out they're actually the same. I'll say the same goddess. They're just different sides, just like the Good Witch and the Bad Witch. Oh,
Yes.
I didn't
Yes.
know I needed that until I saw it. I didn't know I
until you
was
saw
hungry for it until it was fed to me, and then I realized that I'd been missing that all along.
That just that sense of, women have facets too, right?
What? More than just wanting a man?
Yeah, yeah. Like you don't have like this type of woman and that type of woman and that like you. There could be a woman who in the morning is that, and in the afternoon is this, and in the evening it's like I'm going to try something different, right? And so we get that kind of depth and richness sometimes, but not it's not the norm, and it's definitely not in the norm in the stuff that's given to children.
Yes,
and that's where we form these expectations.
And I felt so happy whenever, was it Pixar that came out with Coco? When Pixar came out with Coco, as someone who lives in San Antonio, and we see like the Day of the Dead celebrations, and like one of my favorite outdoor park and shopping areas turns its grounds into people build altars all over altars all over this area that I go to a lot, and there's just all these festivities, and so it's even though that's not necessarily my culture, it's become something that I have like kind of absorbed and been lucky enough to be a part of, and then seeing that reflected on the big screen, and then having friends that don't live anywhere around here have them experience it, and then they had no idea. It's just so and it's so wonderful to see that being shown.
And then there's the character, right? And then there's just the life she lives. I'm trying to remember because that's another one that I haven't seen all the way through. Oh, I'm sorry. I will remedy that this summer.
It's okay. It's okay.
Thank you for loving me.
You're a teacher. You're really busy grading papers.
Oh my gosh, well we can talk about that. That's another check-in.
That is another check-in.
And so you were saying and then there's characters like the lead in Brave. And first of all, I love the song. Say what you wanna say and keep the words falling. Honestly, I wanna see you be brave. Okay. The musical moment.
That's right.
But then the fact that she feels like she's not. She reminds me a lot of the character Arya Stark in Game of Thrones, but that she's her mother's trying so hard to make her girly, and she's just not girly. She wants to be out with. I think there's a scene where she has like branches or something in her hair.
I love that.
And again, we can say, oh, that's a tomboy, but you know what? Why do we have to label it?
As a boy.
Yeah,
why can't it just be?
Yeah, that's just her. Yeah, so even that kind of let her be who she is. Now, granted, I know she's supposed to be raised to be a queen or something. Isn't that the okay? So obviously she has to take the throne in the whole bit. But if she were a king, she'd be doing that, right?
Right.
So we get those mixed messages.
Yeah.
Well, not in this case because she's actually going to become a strong.
Thankfully, yeah. And I felt the same way whenever I saw the live action of Aladdin. And I grew up, when I was growing up, Aladdin was one of the Disney movies that I consumed as a child, and I never questioned it, and I loved Jasmine, and even to this day, as a 38-year-old, whenever I pop on a crop top, I'm like, Jasmine, hello,
Oh right, yes.
But I saw the live action one with Will Smith as the genie.
The genie.
Oh, so good. But then we got towards the end, and I realized that I really liked Jasmine's character, and I was like, I don't want this for her, and I was having these feelings, which I'm sure is exactly what they wanted. But then she had her own song that she sang that wasn't in the original Disney movie, and it was this really powerful song. And then at the end, she becomes the Sultan herself, and it was again that same reaction that I had before, where I'm like, of course it's supposed to be this way. How could I have felt like? How could I just have passively consumed whenever the other was given to me? Well, of course, Aladdin becomes the Sultan, and then he marries her, and then that's the way it's supposed to be, and the end of story, yay, And then I experienced it this way, and I was like, well, this is actually how it should be. Duh.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that I was so easily receptive into the other.
Well, because you were primed, right? You
I
were
was
primed
totally
by
primed.
by all of the other Disney films that came before that that's the way things
Mm-hmm.
are.
And our culture validates that too.
And though it pays lip service, but that's another discussion for another day. It pays lip service to not, but it really does. I mean, or these films would have been different anyway, right? I mean, to start with, but and you know, there's this obvious discussion about, well, it's a reflection of the time, and I get that. But it's just that what I find really interesting is that it took tales that already existed and made them basically romantic not comedies, but made them romances. Yeah.
It's interesting to me too. I have a friend that I work with who actually brought up to me today that she has a young daughter and she's curious about what movie she's going to show her. And then thinking about, like, would I show my daughter Cinderella, the original? Would I?
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know. Like, would I show her? I would show her Frozen. I would show her Moana. I would show her Brave. I would show her Coco. Would I show her Sleeping Beauty?
Right.
You know, like, I'm not so sure.
Yeah. Or show her Sleeping Beauty after she's seen the others.
Right.
Because then that gives her and it's a different time too, right? So I suspect she would not absorb it as maybe I wouldn't say passively, but she wouldn't absorb it as readily as we would have, because that was just kind of our fare, right?
Yes.
That was the food that we were being fed.
Yeah.
Whereas she might have, you know, there's different things in the air now, right? So she might look at that and say, wow, that's pretty dated. That's pretty dated, Mom. You know, or she might enjoy it for what it is, but later say, well, I think I would have liked it more had she, you know.
Yeah. Why didn't she wake up? Or, you know, I don't know. Just asking questions that I never would have asked. Yeah. It was just an interesting thing for me to consider, because I that's just what I thought that you feed children. But now there's so many more wonderful choices.
Yes, exactly. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I do remember, I'm trying to remember if it was the film or if it was like a retelling of it, where, you know, so she falls into a deep sleep. Well, I'm thinking Snow White now.
Okay.
So she falls into a deep sleep, and then for like the next 45 minutes, I'm exaggerating probably, it's about this guy who wasn't a part of the story before, right? And it's about him climbing the hill and hacking his way through the forest and finding everybody, and, you know, it's all about him, and meanwhile she's just laying there. You know, I know she's a chrysalis growing the hair on her legs and her wings and all of that, but still they've made her the prize.
Yes.
Not a woman who is growing and developing. And when he kisses her, she might say, ooh,
like, buy me dinner first.
I know. What's with the breath?
Whoa.
You know.
Or, I'm not even into dudes.
Yeah.
So you did not ask for consent. Hello. I got a priestess waiting out there for me. I'm not interested in no prince.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, times are a little bit changed, and so taking a step back, I was just going to say that, you know, the daughter, I think your friend's daughter will probably see this a little bit more easily than we did.
I hope so, and I think that wouldn't that be a sign of progress? I would say so.
There is this fabulous book by Philip Pullman, the writer of The Golden Compass and the trilogy, his Dark Materials. It's about writing, and it's actually, you know, all of these talks that he gave at various places on writing, but he does a series on fairy tales, on fables and folk tales. And one of the things that he notes, and he's not the only one. There are people in the 19th century who sat down and cataloged all of the different themes that they saw in fairy tales, but there are a number of very popular tropes that you'll see, and one is one thing that a lot of them deal with is motherhood, and in a number of different ways. So one way is often the heroine has to kind of grow into womanhood on her own because there's an absent mother. Usually the mother is dead, or, you know, the daughter may have been abandoned or you know, wandered off or whatever. But so this idea of the value of motherhood and what's important, what does a mother give to a child, because then this woman has to kind of grow into a woman on her own without that. And then the flip side of that is the wicked stepmother, which apparently, listening to Pullman talk about this, was something that was kind of added later, I think in the French versions of these, and then they became widespread. The idea of the wicked stepmother, uh, and jealousy, and a feeling of displacement. So the daughter had been her father's world
Mm-hmm.
until this other female came in. And ostensibly, the father married the mother either because he loved her or because he wanted a mother for her child. But they, instead of becoming collaborators, they became competitors. And so that's a later kind of addition to these tales. And often, in some cases, I remember Philip Pullman kind of reading some of the original versions of it. There was not an evil stepmother at all, you know. So, but they, a lot of them deal with motherhood, and in some sort of way, you know, kind of, you know, figuring out how is that negotiated by either the mothers themselves or the daughters, etc.
Talk about a different world
Mm-hmm.
where, I mean, similar but different, you know, where so many women died in childbirth,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh yeah.
you know, and so then you would have these wives come, you know, remarrying, and then you have children from multiple mothers because they're all dying in childbirth, and then your siblings are dying because, you know, children die a lot, and I mean, it's just so different, and a different lens to look at all of that through
Mm-hmm.
than the one that I was looking at it through when I was a child watching
Right.
Cinderella.
Right. Yeah. And so even in that situation, and obviously we're talking about Disney. The films, they can't dwell on and the fairy tales themselves don't dwell on the
Mm-hmm.
psychological implications of the situations that these young women find themselves in. But if you can take a step back, like you can hear the fairy tale or the folk tale, and then the person who's telling you the tale goes away, and you can sit and absorb it and create your own images around it and play and even unconsciously or subconsciously, I can never remember which one, like deal with like how would I be if I were a mother, or how would I be if I were growing up without a mother,
Mm-hmm.
right? And thinking about what does that make me. So issues of identity and things like that are just kind of pricked by these stories,
Mm-hmm.
right? And obviously in the more sanitized, the Disney versions, you don't even get that because they just kind of meant, if they mention it in passing, and then they
Mm-hmm.
get right to the bitch stepmother.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if that isn't, for me, the power of these fairy tales, um, the, like as you called it, the pricking of like these deeper lessons
Mm-hmm.
and life experiences, and the way that they're so rich, just like in myth, and so much so that we can build faith and spiritualities around them and learn so much about these, from these stories that were told, you know, thousands and thousands of years ago from people who, you know, lived on the side of the Nile. And I'm still learning from that, even though, you know, I just put on a VR headset with you 30 minutes ago, you know?
I know.
But the story still holds these
Mhm.
truths because a human is a human, and because life is life.
And they're still powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Another accretion, and so I don't hold me to this one. I want to say it's one of the later French. And when I say later, I mean like I want to say 17th or 18th century folk tales, French folk tales, taking the idea of good being beautiful.
Mm.
And so all of the heroines are beautiful, and all of the witches are ugly, or they're deceptively beautiful. And once you see through the deception that they, and so and that was again not necessarily a part of the original tales. And one other thing that I just want to mention is that in many of these that Pullman talks about this, that the idea that the best tales, you really don't get character development. You create the character development yourself, but it's usually there was a girl whose father was a woodsman. Like, so you, I mean, sometimes you don't even get names, right? And so it's almost like stock characters, and it's only through our hearing the tale that we in our heads create this thing, that's a person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the beauties of these tales, is that they don't, it's not someone's perspective, it's all your perspective, right? So I think that's interesting. But that whole idea of, you know, the beautiful, that the she's a beautiful girl, and by virtue of being good she's beautiful, and vice versa, is a later thing, which again is it can be a little bit of a trap, right? For women, that you can only be good if you're beautiful, and
right. Well, and what if I don't feel that I'm beautiful? Like, am I bad?
Because you're bad.
I mean, I am. You're bad.
Okay.
Can we talk for a second about the witches in the stories?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And like, okay, so you mentioned Ursula, and so I remember when I watched Little Mermaid was what I consumed when I was like early elementary school.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh God.
Early elementary school.
So old.
So I had a Little Mermaid Velcro shoes because I hadn't learned to tie my shoes yet. Yeah, so like that's
so
something.
So cute.
So, but I remember being like in my living room watching the movie on VHS, and Be Kind, Rewind, right?
Yes.
And I remember watching and seeing those scenes where the sea witch who's transformed into the woman, and she takes like Ariel's place. I remember watching and being like, I kind of like her.
Yeah, because she's a badass.
Also, I think she's really pretty. I kind of think she's prettier than Ariel. And yeah, and I remember struggling and thinking like, I'm not supposed to like her.
You're not supposed to like her. Yeah.
She's not. She's the bad person. Like she's the evil person. But I remember like, why am I having these feelings? I actually think I like her more. And then when we interviewed Roma, and Roma talked about like identifying with them, I had never thought about it so clearly as when she said that like she had those thoughts, and I was like, oh, maybe that's why I was. Yeah. I was identifying with power and control and having a plan and like making what she wants happen and taking control of her life.
Yes. And of course that's a bad thing. In these films,
right? Yeah, under this paradigm, yes.
Yeah, I mean, well, maybe stealing someone's voice,
and also maybe don't do that, right? And don't lie to the prince, blah 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 blah. But
yeah, whatever.
But there are these things that there are things about it that I think that's what I was attracted to.
Oh yeah, totally. And the best music too. That's the part that always got me. It's like who gets the best music, and and the witches do. They get like. It's always chromatic, so there's a lot more poignancy to it, and oh my gosh. Anyway, I'm not gonna. That's another discussion for another day. But yeah, I think, and we just get the evil side of them, but every once in a while you get the glimpse of like why they're that way. You don't get it a whole lot in the early Disney films, but every once in a while they slip, and you get a sense of it, and you just think, like. She's making some mistakes, but who doesn't? Yeah. I mean, Ariel made mistakes, right? Yeah. So identifying with the witch, and then that the witch is reclaimed too, right? With Maleficent. Yeah. And just that whole idea of seeing, she made mistakes, but she's a flawed human being, and so seeing a flawed human being instead of these archetype good women, bad women, it's always a beautiful thing to see.
Whenever they show Maleficent like lovingly watching the little girl, and just like the way she adored on her and doted on her, I remember just being like, oh my gosh, I was so wrong, you're so amazing. I'm so sorry I judged you.
Yes, yeah. And so but even in the original, because they didn't invite her. Yes. Like they invited all of the other fairy godmother, fairy whatever,
women-y with very spirity things. Yes.
Yeah, they invite all of them but her. It's like, well,
what do you think is gonna happen?
I mean, so a powerful woman that has magic, like,
come on.
Yeah, so it's like, maybe she abused her power a little bit, but I mean, so even in the early Disney version, there was, you got a little bit of a sense of who they were. So. And who's the one with the mirror? Is that Snow White? Yes. Like, she had a good relationship with her mirror. So there were like these softer moments of her, but maybe not as many as with the other Disney villainesses. So let's talk a little bit about your favorite. Okay. So I think I know what it is, but
yes, The Little Mermaid. From when I was growing up.
So what was it? Just because that was the one that was out at that time, or because I think that was the first the first of the modern Disneys, right? Of the Disney princesses.
I think so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
At least for me, it was.
Mm-hmm.
So what I realized as I was reflecting for you and I to talk was the things that I loved about The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, which are my two favorites, actually aren't really about the story themselves. They're just things that I feel like resonated with me that I clung on to because it was, I was offered these stories so I selected these things.
Right.
Like with The Little Mermaid, I loved seeing her swim and use her body.
And there's that makes sense.
Yes. So, and this is me. So, and this is me being 38 years old, getting ready to talk to you and having all these epiphanies because I just always been like, I love Little Mermaid. I love Beauty and the Beast. I never thought why, So seeing her swim and seeing her move, and there's this one scene in The Little Mermaid where she pushes up on a rock. She's singing Part of Her World, and the waves crash behind her. And I remember we had a above ground pool with a ladder. I would climb up the ladder and I would push myself up on the ladder.
Oh, how cute!
To be like her, and I would I had a giant Dr. Dolittle book I would get from my elementary school library, and I would walk home and I would carry that book across my chest with my arms X'd across me like Belle would in Beauty and the Beast, and I would sing the song that she sang because I loved books and I loved reading, and I loved in Beauty and the Beast she has a library. And the Beast gives her a library,
right,
and with a ladder that's so tall that it's on wheels, and she can I just love that. She also has a cape that's reddish burgundy.
Yeah.
But those are the things that I loved, and so when I look back at that now, I'm like, what do I love? I love learning. I love capes, which is clear to anyone who's listened to this podcast. I always talk about how I love capes. I love learning, and I love moving and having a strong body, and those are the things that I loved. Out of those fairy tales.
Wow,
so
that's amazing.
That's what I've been thinking about today.
Yeah.
What about you? What are some ones that you really liked?
Well, so here's the thing. I kind of grew up on different tales, but of the traditional fairy tales, the one I liked is not for the reason I think that I'm supposed to, but I've always liked Red Riding Hood.
Really?
And the reason I've liked Red Riding Hood, first of all, there's no freaking prince in there. No. And at the time I didn't know that was a thing for me, that but there's a woodsman and he cuts the but it was this whole idea. I think for me, so I was raised not in the hood, but there were some hoods I had to pass through to get to school carrying my cello, right? Okay.
Right.
With my best friend who carried a bassoon. So there you go.
Y'all didn't have nice little the flute and the viola or something really small.
Instruments that pretty much. We might as well have just carved the word nerd on our foreheads, right? But anyway.
Target.
Attack us. Anyway, but the thing about her is that there's this. So let me give you a little psychological implications of Red Riding Hood, and then I'll tell you what I was thinking. No, let me tell you what I was thinking, and then I'll get, because that's first. So there's this wolf that keeps trying to talk to her, and I just remember as a young woman, a tween and a teen, I was taught to be polite, and even when someone is being almost attacking me, I'm trying not to cause a scene, and I remember that actually happened to me. I was on a bus and someone was literally touching me and I'm trying not to cause a scene. I mean, think about how warped that is.
But also I totally empathize with being taught that.
Yeah, that you don't cause a scene.
Don't cause a scene. Don't upset them.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Why should we not upset them?
Yes. I mean, because they might kill us. But that's not really the story we were told, right?
Right.
So yeah, and so she's constantly being molested by this wolf who keeps popping up, and so being stalked, right? And then because he can't get her, then he goes and gets her grandmother. Right. So this is how I'm taking this, and then in the real story he eats her too, and then the woodsman just kind of comes out of the woods for some strange reason. I don't know if he hears the noise or he's just I think I'm gonna cut me up some wolf or cut up a grandma or whatever. I'm not quite sure exactly. I have to go back and look at the original story now. But anyway, he cuts the wolf and out
pop them.
Yeah, like they weren't digested and swallowed, whatever, you know. But then looking, so that had always struck me, and so not necessarily in a positive way, right? But it's kind of like, you know, when you have this is probably like an old school thing, but you just have the tooth that bothers you, and instead of just leaving it alone, you just keep sticking your tongue in it or whatever. Like, you know, it's kind of that same thing where it was kind of yucky, but I kept reading it and kept exploring it. And now looking at some of the psychological deconstruction of it, it makes sense. So first of all, the Red Riding Hood, that's supposed to be her first menstruation. So it's about a woman. Ooh. It's about a girl becoming a woman. And her mother tells her, don't stray from the path, and she strays from the path. Don't talk to strangers. She talks to strangers because she's trying to separate from her mother.
Yes.
You know, she's trying to become her own. No, she's doing that by doing all the wrong stuff. But you know, but so there is that. And then her grandmother. I can't remember how they deconstruct the grandmother, but the whole idea is that so something that had always kind of made me on edge and made me uncomfortable, and I didn't know why. When I found this, like 20, 30 years later, I didn't necessarily agree with everything that they said, but at least gave me something to explain why I was always so uncomfortable with that story.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Boy, if that isn't a reason for me to remember that if I'm uncomfortable with something and I'm like drawn to it, that there might be something really, really powerful there. Yeah,
that you need to explore and you know, dig deep and dig into the discomfort. But I didn't know. I just knew, even from a child. You know, I'm sure the first time I heard it was before I was the age of 6, but I do remember hearing it at the because I was in first grade, and that was one of the stories one of the storybooks that when I got the chance to pick the storybook for reading hour, that I gave to the teacher. And so so I remember it then, and just remember thinking, why the hell did I pick this one? Because this is a disgusting story, or something probably not that well thought out.
Right.
But it was just, and everyone's, and, you know, everyone's screaming at the right moments, and they're better to eat you with, my dear. And like everyone's losing their frickin' minds, and I'm just thinking. You know, I was literally, everyone else was reacting to the story, and I remember sitting there thinking, what the hell is wrong with me that I am not appreciating the story? Isn't it amazing how you just automatically assumed that it was, you know, something wrong with me?
Yeah. Oh. Instead, it seems like you were really keyed into this like deeper thing that was going on.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. And then I know I wasn't screwed up. But yeah. One of the things that we mentioned is not only reclaiming these stories, but as I was talking about kind of the psychological deconstruction of these stories, one famous book that I highly, highly recommend if you haven't read this and you're at all interested in women's issues and portrayals and imagery and folktales, is Women Who Run with the Wolves, I think it is. I think it's Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Estes Pinkola, or Pinkola Estes. I can never remember the order. But I will have it right and put it on our website when this becomes live. Anyway, she takes these tales and shows how they are actually reflective of, first of all, you know, some patriarchal ideas and how they're being imposed in these folk tales, but also ways that that women are kind of negotiating their limits and working sometimes within their limits for some degree of autonomy and agency.
I would have to say I have not read this book. I know. But it seems like everyone I care about has.
So it's so amazing that you say that, because I can't remember, for one of our retreats we did this book.
That might have been before
it might have been before your time, before you actually started like staying.
I know, whenever I was just like, I'm pretty sure y'all are not as awesome as you say you are, and I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop.
You were kind of dipping like the tip of your toe in the pool.
Trust issues. Woohoo!
That's okay. You're here now.
I am.
So you're an integral part of our circle. But yeah, so we actually did a retreat around this and took some of the archetypes and actually you've worked with one of them at a retreat, the Vasilisa story.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. But the thing I love about it is that she takes these tales that often sound like a woman is basically at the like a victim of her circumstances, and she shows the ways in which even in those circumstances this woman has like her little glimmer of hope and creating and no has created this little glimmer of hope, not someone showing her this, that she herself has taken a little bit of this of the crap and used it to make I don't know,
a crap sandwich.
I was gonna say what is it?
Fertilizer.
Fertilizer. There we go.
Yeah,
yes.
She's like, oh, this is shit.
Let's make fertilizer.
Let's make fertilizer.
There we go. Exactly. So I highly recommend this book. I mean, it's been out for decades. So you can get it anywhere pretty cheaply. But it's I think it's a wonderful just way of starting to maybe look into these a little bit more. We're actually going to read 2 short poems today. Both of them are by Amanda Lovelace. You want to tell us a little bit about her?
We've read some of her stuff on this before, but she's an American poet and she got her start on Tumblr and Instagram. And one of my favorite things about her is the titles of her books are always contrary. Like in this one, The Princess Saves Herself.
Yes.
Like it's just really nice to kind of see the fairy tale tropes turned around.
Exactly.
And that's really attractive to me.
Yes. So I'm going to read, well, I don't know if it has a title, but I'm just going to read it. The princess jumped from the tower, and she learned that she could fly all along. She never needed those wings.
Write the story. Push your hands into the dirtiest parts of yourself. Take the rot and decay and turn it into nourishment and life. Water it and sing to it and show it sunlight. Grow a beautiful garden from your aching and teach yourself how to thrive from it. Write your story. The sign you've been waiting for. We hope you've enjoyed the magic that has unfolded here at Witchy Wit.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Witchy Wit Podcast.
Email us at witchywit123@gmail.com. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Get exclusive content and support us on Patreon.
Stay witchy, y'all.